Medieval India, chapter number 8, page number 85. Religious freedom under the Sultanate. The extent of religious freedom accorded to the non-Muslims under the Delhi Sultanate may be seen in this context. In the early phase of the conquest, many cities were sacked and temples formed a special target, partly to justify the conquest and partly to seize the fabulous treasures they were supposed to contain. During this period, a number of Hindu temples were converted into mosques. The most notable example of this is the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque near the Qutub Minar in Delhi. Formerly, it had been a Vishnu temple. In order to convert it into a mosque, the inner sanctum which contained the deity was pulled down, and in front of it a screen of arches containing inscribed verses from the Quran was put up. Pillars from many temples were used to put a cloister around the courtyard. The courtyard remained more or less intact. This was done in a number of other places such as Ajmer. But as soon as the Turks were settled, they started building their own mosques. Their policy towards the temples and places of worship of Hindus, Jains, etc., rested on the Muslim law Sharia, which forbade new places of worship being built in opposition to Islam. But it allowed the repair of old temples, since buildings cannot last forever. This meant that there was no ban on erecting temples in the villages, since there were no practices of Islam there. Similarly, temples could be built within the privacy of homes. But this liberal policy was not followed in times of war. Then the enemies of Islam, whether human beings or gods, were to be fought and destroyed. In times of peace, however, within the Turkish territories and in those areas where the Rajas had submitted to the Muslim rule, the Hindu practiced their religion openly and ostentatiously. According to Barani, Jalaluddin Khilji observed that even in the capital and provincial centers, the idols were publicly worshipped and the text Hinduism publicly preached. The Hindus passed beneath the wall of the royal palace in processions, singing, dancing, and beating drums to immerse their idols in Yamuna. "And I am helpless," he said. Despite the pressure of a section of orthodox theologians, this policy of broad toleration was maintained during the Sultanate, though with occasional lapses. Sometimes prisoners of war were converted or criminals exempted from punishment if they accepted Islam. Feroz executed a Brahmin for abusing the Prophet of Islam. On the other hand, there are some instances of conversion of Muslims to Hinduism. Thus, Chaitanya, the great Vaishnava reformer, converted a number of Muslims. The theologians, of course, considered apostasy from Islam to be a capital crime. On the whole, conversions to Islam were not effected with the strength of the sword. If that was so, the Hindu population of Delhi region would have been the first to be converted. The Muslim rulers had realized that the Hindu faith was too strong to be destroyed by force. Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, the famous Sufi saint of Delhi, observed, "Some Hindus know that Islam is a true religion, but they do not embrace Islam." Barani also says that attempt to use force had no effect on the Hindus. Conversions to Islam were due to hopes of political gain or economic advantage, or improve one's social position. Sometimes, when an important ruler or tribal chief converted, his example was followed by his subjects. The Sufi saints too played a role, though they were generally unconcerned with the conversions and welcomed both the Hindus and the Muslims into their discourses. The saintly character of some of the Sufi saints created a receptive climate for Islam. There is no evidence, however, that large number of persons belonging to lower castes embraced Islam due to the discriminations against them in the Hindu society. and to the influence of the Sufi saints. Conversions were thus due to personal, political, and in some cases regional factors, as in Punjab, East Bengal, etc. Following the Mongol invasions of West Asia, many persons belonging to prominent Muslim families fled to India. There was also a steady influx of Afghans into India. Many of them enrolled themselves in the Turkish armies or were engaged in trade. A further influx of the Afghans took place in the 15th century under the Lodi rule. Despite this, the number of Muslims in India remained comparatively small. The nature of Hindu Muslim relations and the cultural attitudes of the two, which will be examined in a subsequent chapter, were conditions by this situation. Thank you everyone for tuning in. In the next part, we'll start with the next chapter, that is chapter number 9 for medieval India. All the best for exams, and do share and subscribe the channel for more videos like this. Thank you everyone.